utilstedeligt på en måde, eller?
Vil du starte med at fortælle, hvordan du kender hende?
Jo, jeg er hendes lærer på Nordfyns Gymnasium, hvor jeg underviser i dansk. Eller, det gjorde jeg. Jeg er suspenderet nu. Og hun er en ret kompliceret person, hvis man kan sige det sådan. Hun bor alene med sin mor, som drikker ret meget. Og jeg ved ikke rigtig, hvor hendes far er. Han er i hvert fald ikke en del af billedet.
Oh my god, this story
was
crazy. I really love the creative choice of starting it out with in like an interrogation style questioning, because it really it was an interesting way to like it was an interesting in-look on this story, and like it really just played with my emotions a lot, and it was just like it was done so well. The narrative structure was great. The ending, like, just damn. It was a lot. But I thought it was masterfully done, and it was a great story.
It was a really gripping story, and the way that the narrative is framed, I think, allowed the story to come across best. The color grading, it's very bleak, and you kind of get this feeling of there's almost like this mystique to the characters, like you don't know them yet. And I like how towards the end, the character that you're presented with first, that it's almost centered on, turns out to be like really awful. And I just thought that was an interesting choice by the writers to have like almost like a moral switch that makes you question it. Overall, the acting is really good. The camera work is beautiful, and it's really jarring. It's shocking, but the shock is not out of place, and the shock is not just for the sake of shock. It's for the sake of the story. It's heavy stuff. I thought it was great.
This was really intense. They did a really interesting thing, which was kind of approach the entire situation from like the teacher's point of view. And because that's how it starts off, and in general you tend to have a lot of sympathy towards the protagonist, you start off like wanting to believe that like nothing happened and then it was innocent, and you want to believe her. And then as it progresses, you just find out so much more information, and you get a clearer picture of the situation and like what actually happened. So I thought that was a really interesting way to approach the entire film, of like really having it from her point of view. You're in for parts of her interview at the beginning. You don't even really get a clear picture of Rebecca until much later, and you don't get any interaction with her until much later. So I thought all of that was really interesting, and you just little by little start to kind of get a feel for what actually happened. So I thought that was a really interesting take on it, and it definitely kept me intrigued the entire time.
The overall visual tone of this film was so well done. It was so artistic, and it felt very high quality. I don't know what the budget for this film was, but it looked like it was big. The cinematography was stunning. The lighting was beautiful. It felt like this beautiful art film, and I felt like the tone, really just lended itself to the storyline and the subject matter. One thing that I really appreciate in storytelling and filmmaking is when the main character is not likable. I feel like it forces you to kind of see the story in a new light and just think about things from a different angle, because we're so used to being sympathetic to the main character and rooting for them, but that was not the case in this, and it was an interesting point of view. Rather than from the young girl who was the victim, it was actually the woman who was the abuser. And I like that they didn't make her sympathetic. They didn't make her a likable character. We weren't 100% sure what the entire situation was from the beginning, but as we revealed more and more about her character, we realized just how, unhinged she was. This was just an incredible, incredible piece of art, and just I want to give a shout out to the two actors who really just did an incredible job doing really difficult work.
This one was really interesting. It's kind of like a little bit of a thriller, and I love how they sort of play with time and juxtaposition in here through the editing and the storytelling. It really shows, how it's very insightful for the way that the characters are feeling, and I think it's a great way of demonstrating how much has changed over the course of time. And and I think that it's just an evidence of just strong storytelling instincts and filmmaking instincts. And I think that all the filmmakers involved, including the two actors, have a lot to be proud of with this. I think that it's really, really solid and hold up well.
It was so suspenseful. Like, the cinematography in it was great. I think you had a great use of sound to build suspense. There's the scene in the car that sticks out to me the most, where she's tapping her fingers and the sound of on the steering wheel, and the sound of like an overwhelming tapping builds up in the background, and it adds just this other layer, and you aren't really sure of what's going on all the time. You see her in this police station at the beginning being questioned, and it just beautifully done. It builds suspense throughout, at like not a ridiculous pace. So it keeps you guessing, and it gives you just enough to kind of like piece the story together as you're going along, which sometimes, surprisingly with these thrillers, that isn't always the case, with what's turned in. So it was really, really well done. And I have to, say kudos again to the cinematography, and I don't know if it would be sound design, but whoever was making the decisions behind the sound, just great job, and it added a just whole other layer.